So I see here. Welcome back. We are on the session, which is a keynote direct investing on tech-enabled education and social impact startups. The keynote presenter is Farid Baddache. He is the CEO, co-founder, SEPA from Paris. He is known to leverage environmental, social, ethical performance to innovate, improve competitiveness of corporates. He is a global profile with 20 years experience in sustainability, combining corporate experience across consumer and industrial sectors, NGO, academic, development, consulting for 150 clients, 100 markets. Great. So with the deep practical experience across all aspects, sustainability, health and safety, environment, green ethics, social business, products and services. Over to you, Farid. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and glad to talk to all of you. I will share a few slides to explain briefly what we are, what we do, and I will go straight to one concrete example of program where we are designing and deploying with the vision to basically leverage technologies to provide better access to education to people who generally don't have access to that kind of education. And we develop that through programs that we frame as investment opportunities where we track impact and where we generate return on investment. And I will explain exactly how it works. So let me first and foremost share my screen. And in a second.
Yes. Yeah, it's visible.
Perfect. So that'll be threefold. One, what we are at Ksapa. Second, how we operate. And three, one concrete example. So what we are, Ksapa.org, is you can have a quick look at our website. We basically have been established to combine three things. And I've been the CEO of that organization with really one simple challenge and thing that we really want to do with Ksapa.org. We really want to change the approach of how our investors, community, and large companies can join efforts to address sustainability issues differently, leveraging the strengths of finance, the opportunities developed by technologies, and working on the complex issues of sustainability. And we really want to do develop concrete programs at the nexus of those three elements, because this is how we believe we can reach scale, really have transformative impact, and really address some challenges that are really important. And here I'm talking about climate challenges. To connect with the previous presentation at the far end, I'm connecting here with the deep issues witnessed by the poor, getting even poorer in the context of COVID-19 across the globe. So I've been the CEO of our organization, and now we operate. So our clients right now are basically Fortune 500 companies. I'm based myself in France, but we operate with a network of 150 plus people based across the globe. Mostly, we really have some programs underway, typically in India, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Madagascar, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Brazil, US, with people based in West Coast, East Coast. And I'm just giving a quick snapshot. So our work, and to explain you the journey we have working with a community of investors, is first to frame the priorities. We are asked typically to explore how companies can have a better impact, for example, on issues like climate. If they're in investors, we help them to tag and basically better focus investment opportunities on sustainability issues, ESG issues. That's one thing we do. And the second here that gives an idea of how we operate, and that's basically consulting, where we provide advisory consulting activities for investors. When we work with large companies, if you look at our websites, there is a section called Aware Partner. You can have a look at some of the large companies which basically support our activities. Then our effort is to understand how they could use technologies. And here I would be very very simple. And I would say that based on what we're doing, sometimes we don't use super developed and technologies that are the most innovative and advanced, because we we need to address typically some people can be in some cases low educated people. So we sometimes in areas where with limited data coverage. So in some cases we are pretty simple in kind of technologies we want to deploy. But when we're working with those large companies, we say, hey, you have big problems, typically sourcing, for example, because that will connect with my concrete example, agricultural commodities. It's not sustainable. You generate a lot of, for example, deforestation issues, climate change issues, with poor working and labor conditions for the workers that are the far end of that supply chain. So you guys from large companies, we want to design scalable programs and we can bring working capital with those programs, which can help you over time. And this is long-term commitment, 5 years, 7 years commitments are really likely and going to have a very strong impact on those issues and provide remediation and help you to secure access to some strategic raw materials in my example. So in a nutshell, our DNA is really to operate at the nexus between the world of investors, the world of concrete, real-world business issues of large companies, and deploy in response scalable programs combining digital solutions and working capital brought by investors, able to generate return on investment and impact on the issues. In the current context, of course, this is a way that has proven to be helpful because our companies from large industries are under strong pressure from their investors, from regulatory pressure, typically for some material that they want to import in the US. US customs are increasingly looking closely at working conditions, allegations to import rubber gloves from Malaysia, child labor and cocoa from Cote d'Ivoire. So from the US perspective, those large industries are under that kind of regulatory pressure. In Europe, we have a combination of regulatory pressure that can come also from typically what is called the duty of vigilance in 2021, where large companies are expected to really have a better understanding of the risks of their sourcing activities. And from an investor perspective, what we provide is basically a way to diversify portfolio, generate impact. Some want to commit and have concrete impact, but can't find basically the right opportunities. And in the current context where liquidity is tend to work at a very limited return on investment, it's just a way to diversify, take risk, but clearly get opportunities to generate good return. So here, let me give you one example. And I will start from the far end of it, the smallholder. So we have, in the example that I'm going to share, I'm going to talk about natural rubber. Natural rubber is an agricultural commodity that is grown mostly close to the equator line, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, among other countries. And this is a commodity which is extremely fragmented, with smallholders who are increasingly disincentivized to cultivate and grow rubber, simply because they don't make enough money out of it. And they don't make enough money out of it simply because at the end of the day, they don't have access to the right agronomist training, so they don't have the right technical skills, and they don't have access to the right equipment, among many other things. On the other hand, you have industrial companies sourcing those kind of natural rubber activities for multiple services. And in COVID-19 context, you can imagine that one good way to use natural rubber is clearly to produce latex that is extremely useful as part of the big global demand for sanitary disposable gloves, for example, and other items. It's natural rubber is also something that is used to produce tires, produce apparel component, and multiple other things. So this SUTI program, Scale Up Training, Traceability, and Impact Initiative, is developed to provide access to farmers, combining three things: the digitalization of access to training content enables to reach a large scale, we use working capital, and I will explain exactly how it works in a minute. And of course, that implies that we need to build a pretty complex a coalition combining buyers, industrial buyers, who basically consider that, in my example, natural rubber is something that is strategic to them, that they want to secure, and where they want to decrease environmental and social risks, deforestation, climate, poor or insufficient guarantees in terms of working and working conditions or child labor, those kind of things. Investors seeking for those kind of positive impacts, climate, deforestation, among others, and then we deploy those programs. Here you can see the kind of digital solutions we're using. So in this example, we combine, actually, I would say, low tech. So we are basically designing an application that is accessible on what we call feature phones. That means entry-level smartphone. You just need to have a web browser. If you're unable to really read the content, you can basically just press on the button, and based on the language, of course, the content is provided in Thai, in Bahasa, for example. So of course, it's provided in the languages of those smallholder farmers I'm talking about. But should you have difficulties to read, you just press a button, and automatically there is a text-speech function. And what you have access to, in combination with a local NGO responsible for deployment of those programs with local instructors, is basically, if you are a pro in Thailand as a smallholder farmer, you meet with an instructor, you have regular face-to-face meetings with groups to discuss specific aspects, water irrigation and other topics in group, to understand the current practices, what can be different with better practices. And then when you get back to your farm, and over time you continue with your feature phone to have access to additional content, videos, simple graphs that explain exactly the good practices that you need to deploy. And then over time, when the kind of training is completed, you access questionnaires to track impact and adoption of the different practices. If I take my example of water, at the beginning, there is a kind of baseline study. We want to understand the irrigation practice and consider, for example, that you need to use 5 gallons each time you need to irrigate your plot. And over time, with regular questionnaire, we explore how the new practice has been adopted, and we are able to decrease that from 5 to half of it, for example, to or something of water consumption. That's how we track impact with this. There is an offline function. So for those farmers working in poor or coverage area, when they have a chance to go to the cooperative or go to a training center with the instructor, they can synchronize content. And when they're back to their farm, basically they can work and have access to some of the content offline, of course. So the reason why this digital support has proven to be extremely useful in my concrete example is basically that what we've witnessed is that across a lot of the areas where we operate, when one farmer comes and take part in the training activities, that farmer is working at farm level with between 5 and 15 people working at the farm. We don't have access to the training face-to-face sessions. That implies that because of the digital vehicle, we're able to disseminate content through the videos and concrete stuff at a much larger scale. And the other very positive aspect of this digital platform is first to ensure that we can track impact. And so when we get back to the investors typically that are investing in those programs, we're able to track how many people have access to the program. In my example of irrigation, how we're able to track the actual impact and how the content has proven to halve water consumption. And if the investor is seeking for those kind of impact, then we can prove it. Second and third, it's of course the kind of support. I'm talking about low tech here, but I can clearly talk about some more advanced technologies. And typically we fund some of those programs with, for example, the inclusion of carbon compensation that can apply well with agroforestry and rubber trees. And in this case, we use the platform to add on top of it a kind of a transaction mechanism where we can sell carbon credits that generate token which can be used by farmers to buy, for example, equipment. And this is where I will connect with the question of gamification and those kind of innovative approaches to education. We know that a challenge that we have right now in those universes of small farming is basically people are getting old, generally. The activities are not interesting and do not attract youth. And in some cases, actually, there is even a problem with gender. It's very male dominant, whereas a lot of women are clearly able and capable to help and provide strong support at farm. So in response to those issues, gamification is, of course, something extremely interesting to retain first people in the application, and typically when they respond to what I would call the impact questionnaire, enabling for us to track adoption of different practices, they make a score and they can get some points basically, and with the points they can have a discount when they need to buy intrants, for example, fertilizers and those kind of products. 1, 2, through gamification, when they prove to be retained and provide basically data, they're incentivized to have access into token that can enable them to buy, for example, equipment. We're exploring right now, as part of the development of those benefits that you get through gamification, access to loans and financial services. Typically, when a smallholder has basically a big health issues, right now, of course, there is no health coverage and that kind of thing, where that could have a strong bearing on the capacity of smallholder farmers to become less vulnerable. Another interest of how we are exploring gamification and why we incentivize people to provide to complete questionnaires is also that we are exploring diversification, and typically through training, if there is a primary agricultural commodity, for example, natural rubber, we're exploring intercropping that can live very well with natural rubber. Cocoa is a good example. Pineapple is another good example. And when we are developing those secondary activities or cropping activities, we diversify revenues, 1, to increase resilience of farmers, 2, but 3, we deploy also local capacities to identify market linkages. You grow pineapples and you identify where you can sell your pineapples. And if you want to sell your pineapples, then through gamification, we generate kind of emulation across farmers to identify at what price they are selling, what volume, what quality, those kind of things. And of course, to develop those concrete things, we need to be very anchored in the local context, and that's why maintaining with digital support some face-to-face activities that we are deploying through local NGOs is extremely useful because they are in day-to-day contact with farmers. So I will close with the fund aspect of it, because the problem with those programs is basically the access to working capital. Traditionally speaking, people who want to deploy those kind of programs think in terms of, I have a budget, and with that budget, I'm able to reach that number of people. We are completely changing that approach, and instead we're saying we need working capital, and because we have a certain level of capital, we're able to typically recruit a significant number of trainers, a significant level of communication activities, ensuring that we recruit a significant scale of farmers, which really make a difference to collect the right number of data and the right level of momentum in a given area. So the initiative that we build is an initiative where we bring upfront some working capital. We ask the Fortune 500 companies I was talking about to basically pay a premium for the strategic commodity they are operating with, because actually we're doing their job. We're mitigating risks, we're securing production of strategic commodities on their behalf. So we ask them to pay for that. We support that with blended mechanism. We have some investors who basically provide a kind of a tier 2 level of security for investors, meaning that when you're able to reach a number, for example, of smallholders, in my example, they give a premium to investors to on top of the return on investment that they can expect. And clearly, we have a lot of banks and development banks who clearly support that. We ask participants in some instances for some program to pay a fee, which is capped. It's marginal, but something for them to feel that they pay for to take the whole program seriously. And carbon valuation is, I get that as an example, it takes time. That's why we need working capital at the beginning to put in place the right technical itinerary, make sure that we have the right measures, the right technical data, the right qualification, basically, of the plots of our farmers. And then over time, that can generate a significant amount of work stream of revenues for the whole program in terms of revenue streams. And I will close with this because those programs, this is one fund that we are deploying. Typically, our funds that are developed to either focus on one commodity, natural rubber being one, or two. It's more interesting in our perspective. Our funds that basically are developed across commodities. Right now, we're working on sugarcane, mint, potato, natural rubber, as I mentioned, and a few others, fragrances. And with the fund, we are exploring a target IRR of something like 7%. And as you can see, what's very interesting from an impact perspective, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, is basically we're tracking quality access. $500,000 for between now and the 8 years to come. With details on the fund characteristics, I mentioned that I was based myself in France. That our company is headquartered in France, and the fact that the legal form is for this fund is based in France. We actually also have some funds based in Singapore for now. And I would close here with my contact details. If you want to know a little bit more, we don't necessarily make too much of that information available on our website. Although on the website, you can have access to our partners, ecosystem of clients, and a lot of information in the publication section about our insights and how we are approaching those topics on technology, investment, and risk mitigation on those major social and environmental issues that we have right now. So I will close here, I think, to make sure that we have time for Q&A.
We'll find any questions from the people who are here. I mean, your sector is something impactful. I couldn't find questions. But which are the sectors you work on? Which are the countries you work on?
Yes, we work in Indonesia,
Okay.
Thailand, India, Vietnam,
Okay.
Brazil, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Madagascar.
Okay, so focused on education primarily, right?
Correct.
So how do you raise the fund for these activities? Who supports?
For now, it's mostly, it's exclusively for now, it's large banks and investors of that kind. We've been in conversation with family offices who find those funds extremely attractive because it's very concrete at the end of the day. And as was mentioned at by the previous intervener, the way to actually evaluate risks
Okay, how many years you have been doing this, Amir?
We're starting the third year of deployment.
How many people impacted? How many people have been impacted with the solutions you offered?
So we target 500K, and for now we are in the deployment of programs reaching, for now, 25,000 people.
Great, good.
So it's we are in scale. We're basically in scale-up phase right now.
Someone is asking questions. What is your experience like in Vietnam? Elaborate the education in Vietnam process to escape poverty. In the chat you could see.
Yep. So in Vietnam, we are putting in place a program on coffee. And we focus on what we call upper quality coffee, and we are bringing smallholders who find it difficult to make a living to have access to technical training to grow coffee of better quality, meaning for them that they can make better money out of it. That's basically.
Okay. Anything in education?
Well, so for us, education is fundamentally threefold. First, we transfer, I would call that agricultural education, agricultural training. That's one aspect. The second is we transfer what we call sustainability training to explain basically some basic principles on water preservation and those kind of things, for example. And the third aspect of education for us is to explain, for example, simple things like how to manage a P&L, how to take into account some specific issues encountered by women, for example, in field operations. So this is kind of a gender lens. How to address the question of child labor. In our roadmap on child labor, we clearly envision to use some of the funds that is going to be self-financed by the programs to provide, to extend access to education of below 14-year-old children in some remote areas to decrease basically risk of child labor. Child labor being a risk where when children are helping parents at farm without being able to attend school. So that's clearly part of the whole journey that we have on education.
So Farid, you're doing great work. Of course, we'll be in touch with you. We have a lot of connections to use your solutions in different locations across the world. Sure, thank you. Thank you for coming and making the presentation.
I want to thank you for inviting us, sharing what we do, and get a chance to listen to others' inspiring presentations that we have today in this great virtual conference.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.